folks. Welcome to another episode of Sustainable Sedition Radio, a podcast dedicated to helping you build what thrives in changing times, using practical homesteading techniques, self-reliance, and strategic lifestyle design. As always, I'm your host and the creator of the show, Calvin Hutton, and I've got an absolutely killer lineup for you guys in today's episode titled Dispatch Number 6, The Modern Renaissance, Shifting Your Mindset from Consumer to Producer. We live in a world today where everything's just so goddamn fragile, from supply chains to the financial system to people's mindsets. And I'm not here to bash anyone today. I'm just here to simply point out the fact that we've been trained to do nothing but mindlessly consume. And I believe that that's the problem at the core of this culture that we live in. And that's what gives rise to mental issues, social problems, and an overall decay of everything that we hold near and dear. Today, we're going to dig deep into the psychology of why that's the case and practical strategies that you can start doing today to improve your own life and flip the cultural script. Because that's what we're doing here. We're creating a culture of resilience, quality, and personal sovereignty. Stick around at the end for a recipe that you can make easily at home with basic ingredients that'll make you question why you ever go out to eat at any food chain. And without further ado, let's kick it off with a quote from one of my biggest heroes, a man named Bill Mollison. Now, Bill was just an absolute badass genius. He was the co-founder of permaculture and one of the sharpest minds to ever take a full swing at the root causes of our modern dysfunction. What he said decades ago is still one of the most genuinely badass calls to action that I've ever read, every time I read it. And Bill says, the greatest change that we need to make is from consumption to production, even if on a small scale in our own gardens. If only 10% of us do this, there's enough for everyone. Hence, the futility of revolutionaries who have no gardens and who depend on the very system they attack and who produce words and bullets, not food and shelter. Now, I don't know about you, but man, that quote just hits me in the gut every single time. Bill's one of those guys that when I first discovered him, everything I read just got me fired up. But let's get clear first. When Bill's talking about change here, he's not saying that if we all just throw a couple raised beds in the backyard, all the world's problems will magically melt away and we'll all sing Kumbaya while we hold hands and dance around the compost pit. That ain't it. He's talking about something a hell of a lot deeper than most people. And certainly every politician means when they talk about change as if it's some mystical thing that gets handed down to us when all the conditions are right. When a politician starts talking about change, what they usually mean is your compliance with the state's new plan, which in the end, if we're honest, doesn't change anything outside of more control over your wallet, your body, and your choices. Bill wasn't talking about that kind of change. He was talking about a civilizational turning point. He's talking about what happens when enough people shift their mindset from passive dependence on the systems that supply all of our needs to active participation in producing those needs ourselves. When that shift takes root, it starts to transform the core of our culture from one of convenient, mindless consumption to one that creates, sustains, and regenerates real value. This isn't just about tomatoes and compost. He's talking about starting new businesses, reclaiming ancestral skills, learning modern ones, building decentralized economies, and designing resilient communities around cottage industries instead of these corporate chains. He wasn't romanticizing homesteading. He was laying out the blueprint for a modern renaissance. When he says, even on a small scale, he's rejecting the idea that you need 40 acres, a solar array, and a YouTube channel, or that anyone has to ditch society and bail off grid for this change to take place. He's saying to start right now, wherever you are. Whether that's in the city, in a suburb, or in a goddamn studio apartment. Bill was calling on all of us to create this culture right inside the belly of the beast. So, when he calls out the futility of revolutionaries with no gardens, he's not being dismissive. He's offering us a reality check. And at first glance, it almost sounds like a jab, right? Like he's mocking the people that are out there marching in the streets and shouting for change. But that's not Bill. That's not how he operated. He's not knocking the anger. I mean, hell, the anger's valid. Bill understood that. He felt it. But he knew that anger alone wasn't enough. So he wasn't mocking activists. He was just pointing out how fragile a revolution is that doesn't actually build anything, and one that rails against the systems that it still fully depends on for food, for money, and survival. Revolutions fail when they don't produce. And Bill saw this over and over. Idealists with signs, slogans, and spirit, but no systems, no food, no energy plan, no way to create something truly new after the slogans fade. If the movement doesn't help people take back control of their own basic needs, if it doesn't produce, at least at some level, food, medicine, energy, tools, shelter, something, then I hate to say it, but that revolution is just theater. And that is what he meant by futility. Not that their hearts weren't in the right place, but that they lacked the grounding, the literal ground, to make it real. Imagine a kid still living at home with overbearing and genuinely abusive parents. Let's call this kid Johnny. And just for the sake of our little analogy here, let's pretend that in this universe of make-believe, there's no CPS and there's no benevolent outside force that's coming to save him. Johnny's stuck. And Johnny's parents just suck. They have this weird, toxic relationship. They're always fighting and dragging Johnny into their fight. And they always force him to pick a side. And then they both get together and beat the crap out of him, no matter whose side he picks. Is little Johnny going to rise up and overthrow his abusive parents? Is he going to snap, torch the house, and land in juvenile hall? Or is Johnny going to wise up, bide his time, get a job, stash his money, and start building his own plan to move out and become independent enough that one day he doesn't need their house, their drama, or their rules? I mean, come on. Most of us didn't need abusive parents to figure out how to sneak out, bend the rules, and carve out our own little, havens of freedom as teenagers. And it's no different now. Because I hate to break it to you, but we're all Johnny. And this abusive two-party political system is good old mom and dad. But the thing is, we're not children. We're grown-ass adults. And if we really want to find a way out of this mess and solve the real issues at the core of it, it's time we start acting like the grown-ass, capable humans that we are and build accordingly. The truth is that most protests just shuffle power around. They give the feds more funding, and they fail to fix the core problem. And that's not me just being cynical. That's statistically factual. The ones that succeed are the ones that shift power out of the state and into the hands of the people, quietly, skillfully, and locally. Bill's not telling us to burn the house down. He's telling us to build something so functional, so self-reliant, that we don't need the house at all. And when he says to start where you are, he's handing us the playbook. Trying to get these systems to change through force is like trying to knock over a freaking redwood tree with nothing but your fists. You can swing till your hands are bloody, broken nubs, and sure, maybe you can chip off a few pieces of bark, but that tree's not going down just because you're pissed off and throwing punches. And sure, you can go grab a chainsaw, but the state's not a tree. And if you try to go head-to-head with the thing using violence, well, now they've got you right where they want you. The use of force is the state's ultimate weapon. And like we touched on last week, you don't hit an enemy where they're the strongest. It wants you charging in full speed with your fists raised. It knows how to absorb that. It's built for it. But you know what it doesn't know how to handle? Rot. The slow, quiet, natural unraveling from the inside out. The slow erosion of its relevance. The culture shift that doesn't make the headlines, but spreads instead through homesteads, backyards, side hustles, barter networks, food forests, and rogue knowledge passed from hand to hand. We're not attacking the tree. We're becoming the mycelium under the forest floor, decentralized, resilient, and impossible to uproot and kill, because it's got no center that you can attack. And eventually, that ancient giant redwood has to fall. And when it does, our underground network will be ready to absorb the blow and repurpose the rotting wood into something that gives new life to the whole forest. We have time and entropy on our side. And if we channel our energy into producing a new way of life that actually makes people's lives better, right now, then when this whole thing goes tits up, a better alternative already exists. That's how we win this thing. That's the real revolution. It's not about burning the old world down. It's about cultivating the one that replaces it. And Bill gave us permaculture as the blueprint to do just that. Not as a set of gardening tips, but as a full-blown operating system for a new foundation for our civilization. I mean, hell, the old world's already burning. It has been for a long time. And you know, I'm not going to knock you for wanting to go and throw some more matches on the pile. More power to you. But while the flames climb higher, let's make damn sure that we're learning how to become the architects of what comes next. Personally, I don't think the world needs another revolution. I think what it desperately needs is another renaissance. 600 years ago and some change, the Renaissance looked like dudes with powdered wigs, marble statues, and Da Vinci dissecting corpses by candlelight, you know? And yeah, that was part of it, but at its core, the Renaissance was an intellectual prison break from centuries of controlled thought, dogma, and stagnant hierarchy. It was a moment when regular folks everywhere started realizing, hang on, wait, hold on a sec. You know, maybe the Pope doesn't have the only copy of the nature of reality. And maybe the king's not the brightest crayon in the box. And maybe, you know, just maybe, we're allowed to think for ourselves. And the Renaissance wasn't one big event. It was a cultural explosion across many different countries. It was 1,000 sparks catching fire all at once. Artists, scientists, philosophers, and peasants started tearing cracks in the walls of empire. And once those cracks started spreading, the ideas that poured through couldn't be stuffed back in the box. And sure, the church tried, you know, the monarchs tried, the gatekeepers screamed blasphemy and treason, but it didn't matter. The dam was already busted wide open and the flood was just way too much for them to stop. Fast forward to now, and here we are today, back in the Dark Ages. But this time, we've got corporate offices instead of cathedrals. We've got unelected bureaucrats instead of monarchs. And instead of priests with scrolls, we've got experts with blue check marks next to their names and degrees from institutions that teach the same kind of dogmatic nonsense. And just like it was back then, people are living under this illusion that these institutions hold the only patent on truth, the only deciding authority on value, and are the all-wise, all-knowing distributor of permission. You need permission to teach your kid. You need permission to fix your own goddamn roof. You need permission to sell a dozen eggs from the effing chickens in your backyard. We've got a nation of fully grown adults waiting around to be told what's true, what's allowed, and what's safe. And meanwhile, the soil is dead. The economy is fake and falling apart. The food is poison. The news is scripted. And most people feel like they're losing their fucking minds. So yeah, I think we're long overdue for another renaissance. See, the original Renaissance cracked open art, math, science, and the idea of individual sovereignty, but only for a select few. This time around, the ideas aren't flowing through monasteries and royal courts. They're flowing directly to every single person's hands through the little screens we all carry around in our pockets. They're flowing through social media, podcasts, YouTube channels, group chats, workshops, skill gatherings, backyard gardens, and barbecues. This ain't about oil paint and astronomy anymore. It's about self-sufficiency, decentralization, permaculture, encryption, local currencies, and independent thought. We're not just questioning theology. We're questioning the entire operating system. And just like before, the gatekeepers are freaking out and scrambling to plug the leaks. You try to sell raw milk, they'll raid your freaking farm. You try to start your own school, they'll put you on a government watch list. You invent a new energy system that doesn't feed the grid, you end up broke, banned, or you mysteriously disappear. The institutions haven't changed. They've just gotten slicker, richer, and harder to see through. But make no mistake, they're still terrified of one thing, and that's you. Thinking for yourself, producing without permission, and refusing to play by the rules of their rigged game. Let's talk Tesla for a second. And no, not the car, the guy. Nikola Tesla was the epitome of a Renaissance man. He was dropped into an industrial age that had just no idea what to do with him. You know, this guy was dreaming up wireless, clean, free energy for everyone on Earth. You know, no wires, no fuel, no middlemen, just raw, natural energy pulled straight from the Earth's magnetic field. And what happened? J.P. Morgan basically took one look at Tesla's design and said, no, hold on, wait a second. You know, it works, but you can't put a meter on that. How are we supposed to bill people monthly for it? You know, and just like that, they pulled his funding. And we got 100 years of oil wars and power bills instead. Not because it didn't work, but because it worked too well. And it was impossible to be controlled by centralized power. Tesla was a genius, but more than that, he was a threat. Not just to the electrical grid, but to the grid of control that keeps people plugged in, making payments, and staying dependent. He saw a different path, and that made him dangerous. Tesla's ideas showed them a future where their business model was totally irrelevant. And we've seen what happens when a centralized system loses control over its dependents. It's scary as shit for them, you know? Look back at the American Revolution. And the colonists weren't just pissed off, they were prepared. They weren't living off the crown's food supply and petitioning the parliament for aid. You know, they were homesteaders, farmers, builders, blacksmiths. They fed their own families, they fixed their own tools, and they bartered with their neighbors. So when it came time for them to say, screw this, they didn't need to figure out how to survive without the system. They were already doing it. It wasn't just ideology that defeated the greatest military power on Earth. It was physical and cultural independence. And sure, the British Empire tried to crush them with taxes and threats and soldiers, but you can't starve out people that produce their own food. And you can't rule people that don't depend on your system for survival. You've got no leverage. You've got no reason for them to listen to you. And that's why the American Revolution was successful. It wasn't just a protest. It was a full-scale withdrawal from dependency. It was an entire culture of producers standing up and saying, "Hey, we'll take it from here, guys. You're fired." And that's exactly what the modern Renaissance looks like. But this time, it doesn't look like revolting against the Pope or swapping out one flavor of tyranny for another. It looks like millions of regular people doing exactly what Tesla did, but on a smaller, more tactical, and more decentralized scale. It's not about waiting for some messiah figure with a master plan. It's about 1,000 underground revolutions blooming all at once. It looks like families turning their backyards into food forests. Teenagers using AI to learn new skills instead of just copying test answers. Building solar dehydrators and slinging herbal tinctures in signal groups. I don't know. Blue collar workers learning regenerative plumbing, building gray water recycling and water catchment systems for people. Parents pulling their kids out of these government indoctrination camps to create micro communities of real education. Former factory workers becoming full-time craftsmen, running their own businesses using Bitcoin and barter. Tax lawyers teaching gray market entrepreneurs the same loopholes that the big guys use. It's a renaissance that smells like compost and solder, that runs on hand tools and open source code, that trades eggs for firewood and data for sovereignty. It's a new wave of free thinkers waking up and saying, I don't care if I'm the only one. I care less what people think. And I care even less what the state says. I'm going to build it anyway. And they do. One garden, one workshop, and one idea at a time. This isn't some fringe movement anymore. It's a groundswell. It's happening everywhere. And just like before, this new renaissance scares the ever-living shit out of the people who still think that they're in charge. Because even if 10% of us stop asking permission, start producing value, and start modeling a real working alternative, their whole thing collapses under its own weight. And that's what Bill Mollison was getting at. That's what Tesla proved was possible. And that's what this dispatch has been pointing at this whole time. We're not fighting for change. We're not waiting for it. We're producing it from the bottom up. That's not philosophy. It's strategy. It's a blueprint. It's a call to arms. Not with bullets, but with shovels, skills, and action. That's the modern renaissance. And you're not just invited, you're already in it. You're living through it, like it or not. Now, if you haven't gotten triggered and shut this off, or better yet, you agree with what I'm saying and you really want in, then I hate to say it, but it's not enough to just watch, listen, and nod your head while continuing to be a spectator in your own goddamn life. And I get it. I've been there. But it's not enough to just feel fired up and agree with the idea that production beats protest. And that's exactly what the vast majority of people who hear a message like this will do. They'll nod their head, they'll repost a quote, and then they'll go right back to scrolling, stressing out, and numbing themselves with whatever gives them the quickest dopamine hit. It's not because they're dumb or because they're lazy. It's because this system has trained us since birth to live inside of a cage that we can't see. It doesn't lock the doors. It just makes us forget that there's an exit at all. And the bars are made of screens, artificial flavoring, and the deep, dull belief that someone else out there is going to fix it all. See, the thing about consumption isn't just that it makes you dependent on systems outside of yourself. Because, we're all dependent on each other to some degree. The problem with just pure consumption for its own sake is that it makes you mentally passive. When you tell your brain computer that its only job is to scroll, spend money, react, and comply, you program it to stop thinking creatively. Your brain stops reaching for tools and solutions, and it looks for comfort and sedation instead. Cheap dopamine and convenient distractions. Your attention span collapses, and your sense of self gets tied into these things, that are outside of you that you don't control. Your paycheck, your Facebook feed, your algorithm, your government. And before you know it, you're not just trapped in a system. Now you're emotionally attached to it. You defend it, you rationalize it, and you fear life without it. The scariest part is that they've convinced us all that that's freedom. But it is not, I promise you. Freedom is not, I get to pick from 400 flavors of potato chips. It's not, I get to vote for the lesser of two fucking sociopaths every 4 years. It's not, I get to binge 9,000 hours of content while my own talents and my own potential rot away in the basement. That's not life, guys. That is a leash. And now, I'll tell you something. The space between when I first started to realize that something smelled funny about this whole operation and the moment that I actually started producing things with my own hands, it wasn't some lightning bolt moment of personal revelation. That space was years of unlearning, of reprogramming the goddamn factory settings that the system baked into me since I was a kid. Years of catching myself, reaching for the quick fix instead of playing the long game. Years of getting distracted and then having to course correct back towards intentionally living my own life. When I finally started producing, when I first built a compost pit, when I started foraging, when I started creating things, it woke something up in me. This deep, ancient, ancestral satisfaction of being useful, of being human. When I was a teenager, right, I used to play I used to play this video game called Skyrim, and if you know, you know. It's this massive open world where you create your own character. You hunt for animals and you tan the hides, you forage herbs and mushrooms, you brew potions with herbs, and you smith weapons, you trade in towns with the townspeople, you build a homestead, you mine your own ore, and you just, you level up your skills by going out there and just figuring it out. And yeah, you fight dragons, you rescue vampire princesses, and you become some kind of chosen warrior or whatever. And anyway, I spent just an ungodly amount of time just smoking weed and playing Skyrim. But what hooked me wasn't the dragons. It was the production. It was the open world, the self-reliance, the feeling that everything you needed could be either made or grown or crafted or traded for if you just got out there and learned how to do it. The game was a fucking massive waste of time, but it touched something deep, something that I didn't even have words for at the time, something I didn't even know that I was missing. And then years later, here I am, foraging oyster mushrooms for real, building my own compost pits and growing squash, making tinctures and cooking from scratch. And it just freaking hit me one day. And I was like, holy shit, this is like Skyrim in real life, except it's way cooler. Just like it's way cooler when you start doing some of the things that you saw in an Instagram reel that was, made by a guy who maybe you secretly kind of wish that you had the life he lives, and you wish that you had the balls to build that kind of life for yourself. Because when you create something in the real world, you don't just level up your character. You become the kind of person who can actually do things. You build momentum. You build confidence. You become capable. You actually change who you are. And you become the main character in your own story. The skills are real. The food is real. The confidence is real. And the danger? Yeah, that's real too. But so is the victory. And hell, maybe even the Dragon Slayer bit still applies. Maybe every time you outmaneuver some bureaucratic nonsense, every time you build a system that they can't regulate, license, or shut down, every time you do something that benefits your life instead of the system without asking for permission, you're slaying a dragon. The dragon of dependence, the dragon of fear, the dragon of complacency, the dragon of the state. That's dragon slaying in 2025. And once you start producing stuff like that, your brain starts to shift gears. You stop being passive. You start looking at every part of your life and asking, man, how can I do this for myself? How can I grow this or make this or fix this, or how can I trade for this? And you stop saying, hey, someone should fix this. And you start saying, I will. And that's when you know that the Renaissance has taken root in you. It's not a vibe. It's not a lifestyle aesthetic for TikTok. It's not about calling yourself a homesteader or a prepper or an activist. It's about building something so real, so functional, and so free that you don't need their store. You don't need their school. You don't need their media, their medicine, or their narrative. You have your own. So, yeah, maybe the line between fantasy and reality isn't that wide. Maybe Skyrim was onto something. The only real question is, are you going to keep playing someone else's story, someone else's game? Or are you finally ready to write your own? And if that question scares you a little bit, good. Good. That means it's real. Because this isn't a theory. This is my life. This is real life. I'm doing this. I know what it feels like to be halfway between two worlds, with one foot stuck inside the system and the other one trying to kick my way out. And I'm just one of millions of other everyday people who are out there doing the same thing across the entire globe. And we're all telling you there are real tools, real tactics, and real habits that you can start using this week to start making that shift in your own life. We're going to start getting into those now, but I had to hit you with the mindset first, because none of it sticks until you understand the why. And your identity shifts from consumer to creator. So let's make that shift real. And now let's get tactical. All right. So now that we've torched the myth of passive dependence and centralized control, let's talk about a plant that never bought into any of that shit in the first place, and one that most people have been completely brainwashed to kill on sight. This week's plant of the week is the dandelion. Yeah, I'm serious. That so-called weed, that's growing between the cracks in your driveway, the one that people treat like it's some kind of domestic terrorist, that one. The dandelion's been dodging control since before your government was even a thought. Dandelion doesn't check in with Karen at the HOA. It doesn't care when she has a shrieking meltdown because she spotted a few yellow flowers in her pristine lawn. It doesn't wait around for ideal conditions to grow. It doesn't ask for fertilizer, drip irrigation, or a raised bed in some manicured backyard. It just shows up, and it gets to work, and it thrives in sidewalks, in alleyways, in battlefields, and in parking lots. That's exactly why the dandelion belongs in this dispatch. Because the dandelion is the perfect plant to represent this renaissance that we've been talking about. It's decentralized. It's medicinal. It's edible. It's unkillable. And the system has spent decades and billions of dollars trying to convince you that it's a nuisance. The same institutions that push glyphosate like it's holy water are the ones that convince generations of suburbanites to wage chemical warfare against a plant that heals livers, cleans kidneys, supports digestion, feeds pollinators, and survives against all odds. Dandelion leaves are super nutrient dense. They're packed with, I think, iron, calcium, potassium, and I think it's vitamins A, C, and K, I believe. Go look it up if you really want to know. Its flowers make a potent salve, right? Its root can be roasted as a coffee substitute. And the whole damn plant is a powerhouse for detoxing your system, especially your liver, which, let's be honest, probably needs a little bit of love after a couple decades of fucking seed oils and these food-like products that are everywhere. But even beyond the medicinal value, the real reason I'm putting dandelions in the spotlight this week is simple. It's a symbol of rebellion. It's wild. It's useful. It spreads on the wind. And it thrives in the cracks of empire. So you want to be a revolutionary? Cool. Start by refusing to poil your effing soil over something that wants to feed you and heal you. Let the goddamn dandelions grow in peace. Learn from them. Use them. Let them remind you that some of the most powerful medicine in the world is the stuff that's growing right at your feet. Right under the radar. Without a permit, without a barcode, and without apology. Dandelions don't wait for permission. They don't need it. And neither do you. All right. Next up, we've got our tactic for tough times. Or honestly, for good times too. Usually in this section, I like to break down one or two specific strategies that have helped me take back a chunk of my independence. Something that I've tested myself, refined, and that I think you could use too. But today's different. This dispatch went deep into the philosophy, the why behind what we're building. I gave you a few examples, sure, but I also kind of teased at the idea that there's a lot more incoming. And for better or worse, I meant it. So I figured that anything less than just opening up a tactical fire hose on you guys today seemed like it would be a little disrespectful. So what I've got here is a breakdown of 11 core categories that define what I believe a true modern Renaissance looks like. And under each one, I've listed 3 actionable tactics for people in any setting. Whether you're in the middle of the city, the suburbs, or out in the sticks. Let me say this up front before we get into any of this. Not one single person here is going to do every single thing on this list. Not me, not you, not anyone. And that's the point. This isn't some, magic checklist that if you complete every task, the prepper gods are going to come down from the sky and hand you the spear of destiny or some shit. It's a menu. Take what fits. Don't worry about the rest for now. Now, some of these I've done. Some of them I haven't gotten to. Some just don't make sense for my life right now. And others, I just flat out don't want to do. It's not me. And that's how this works. So, if you're listening, just take a mental note of all the stuff that clicks. And imagine a world where even a fraction of us started doing some of these things consistently. Think about how much stronger, freer, and more resilient our communities would be. All right, let's get into it. Into the ultimate beginner's guide to getting your shit together before it all goes to hell. And first up, we've got food production and preservation, because it doesn't matter if you've got a windowsill or 100 acres, feeding yourself is the first step towards real independence. So if you're urban, you can grow microgreens in a sunny window using a recycled salad container and a handful of soil. You get your first harvest in 7 to 10 days. Sunlight, water, scissors, done. And if you want, you can upgrade that system later with LED grow lights and trays and get into shelf farming for year-round greens and total control. You can do this with mushroom fruiting bags too, and have gourmet mushrooms growing on your kitchen counter, ready to throw into meals on demand. Join or start a community garden. Look for cheap annual plots with healthy soil, and bonus points if you can split the cost or trade labor with someone in your neighborhood or apartment building. Learn Lacto-fermentation. No fridge required. Just salt, water, a jar, and a little patience. Start with sauerkraut, pickles, kombucha, even though kombucha is not lacto-fermentation technically, or kimchi, right? Now you're storing food without electricity and adding probiotics at the same time. Now, if you're in the suburbs, you can convert a single raised bed into a high-density polyculture. Herbs, berries, salad greens, flowers, and companion plants, all layered. Stack that function and stop growing lawns that cost you time and money to maintain, and then they don't freaking feed anyone. Next, start up a chest freezer and start buying local meat in bulk. Cow shares, pig shares, or buy from local butchers. Save money, build trust, and shake the hand that feeds you. Learn pressure canning, because when the power goes out, your fridge doesn't mean shit. Stews, beans, chili, and even meat can live on your shelf for years if you know what you're doing. If you're out in the sticks, you can build a passive solar dehydrator. Dry your garden surplus, your foraged mushrooms, or even jerky using just airflow and sunlight. Once it's built, it runs forever. No power bill, no noise, no problems. You can raise dual-purpose livestock, Muscovy ducks or chickens for eggs and meat, rabbits for meat and manure, goats or sheep for dairy, land clearing, meat, and fertility. Choose animals that serve at least 2 functions and feed them from your land, your scraps, or with local feed. Set up a root cellar, or even just bury a cooler. It doesn't need to be fancy. Store squash, onions, potatoes, ferments. No power needed. Just know your frost line. Now let's talk water systems, because when the tap runs dry, or the city starts ominously telling you to boil your water, the only thing that matters is what you've got stored, filtered, or flowing. Now, if you're urban, set up a countertop gravity filter like a Berkeley or a Lexapure. Strip out chlorine, fluoride, heavy metals, and whatever else they're pumping through your pipes. Store water in 5-gallon jugs or stackable water bricks. Tuck them into a closet or under the bed. 3 gallons per day per person minimum. Don't wait for FEMA. Please. Put a 2-gallon bucket in the shower to catch the warm-up water. Use it to flush your toilet or water your plants. In a crisis, that's not waste. It's a backup. If you're in the suburbs, you can install rain barrels on your downspouts with a first flush diverter. Add drip lines on timers to irrigate your garden while you sleep. Dig a simple swale along the slope of your yard. Let rain soak in instead of run off. Plant fruiting bushes on the downhill side. Free water, deeper roots. You can add a 12-volt RV water pump with a manual switch into your home plumbing. Flip it on during an outage and draw water from barrels or tanks. If you're out in the sticks, install a spring box, a ram pump, or a gravity-fed line from your spring. No electricity, just slope, pressure, and smart plumbing. Dig a hand pump well or retrofit your existing well with a manual pump. If your faucet needs PG&E to function, you've got a vulnerability. Build a tiered catchment system. Rain from the roof into a tank, then into a sand filter, then into a cistern, and then out through a gravity line. I know it sounds complicated, but it's not. Set it up once, and it pays you back every single time it rains for the rest of your life. Next, health and herbal medicine, because sometimes shit happens, help's not coming, and you're the doctor now. If you're urban, start a windowsill apothecary with basil, thyme, mint, and calendula in pots or recycled containers. Now you've got medicine in reach, even 10 floors up. Learn kitchen medicine, garlic poultices, ginger tea, honey with cayenne for sore throats. Print a cheat sheet, tape it inside the cabinet. Don't Google symptoms, treat them. Build a portable herbal kit, tinctures, salves, teas, chamomile for sleep, yarrow for bleeding, valerian for stress. Keep it in your go bag or your glove box. It's your field kit for everyday issues, stress, cuts, sleep, sickness. If you're in the suburbs, convert a side yard or flower bed into a stealth medicine patch. Echinacea, comfrey, bee balm, lemon balm. It looks like landscaping and it works like a clinic. Learn to wildcraft local medicinals. Find 5 plants in your area, like plantain, dandelion, cleavers, mugwort, chickweed, and learn how to harvest and use them. Build a home remedy shelf with jars of fire cider, elderberry syrup, tinctures, and dried herbs. Label and rotate it like your pantry. If you're out in the sticks, you can build a full herbal infrastructure, right? Racks for drying, jars for tinctures, crocks for ferments, oils for salves. Do it by season. Make extra for trading. You can grow or forage a seasonal medicine chest, yarrow in spring, elderflower in summer, mushrooms in fall, conifer tips in winter. Store what you don't use and keep it moving year-round. Host a medicine-making skillshare. Teach neighbors how to make fire cider, infused oils, poultices, and decoctions. Turn your land into a hub for healing that doesn't rely on permission slips. Next, energy. Because when the lights go out, the real flex isn't flipping a switch. It's not needing one. If you're urban, pick up a portable power station and a folding solar panel. Enough to keep your phone, your laptop, or your radio running during a blackout. Keep a small infrared space heater and a heavy-duty extension cord ready to run off a neighbor's power, a generator, or a shared solar station during winter grid failures. One warm room is survival. Stockpile rechargeable batteries and get a USB charger that works off solar or hand crank. Lights, radios, and headlamps become gold when the grid flickers. If you're out in the suburbs, install grid-tied solar with battery backup, or at minimum, a generator transfer switch for partial off-grid power. Build a solar oven or a rocket stove in the backyard to cook without gas and electricity. It's great for hot days, it's great for blackouts, or skill-building Saturdays. Keep a mix of corded, cordless, and gas-powered tools so you're never without what you need. Use solar or grid power when it's easy, but don't be fully dependent on anything. Keep your batteries charged, your gas stabilized, and your hand tools sharp. The goal here is layered redundancy. Now, if you're out in the sticks, you can set up a solar array and a battery bank sized for your essentials, right? Like your fridge, your pump, your comms, and your lighting, right? Skip the grid entirely and reduce your dependence. Build a wood gasifier or rocket mass heater for winter heating with hyper efficiency and minimal fuel use. Wire up a 12-volt system as backup to your 120-volt AC. That'll let you run fans, lights, water pumps, and USB chargers straight from your solar or deep cycle batteries with redundancy built in. Now, let's touch on basic skills and tools. Start doing the things that were everyday tasks for our ancestors that we've just completely lost touch with. If you're urban, you could start learning the basics that keep a person grounded. How to cook a decent meal from scratch without a microwave. How to sew up a ripped pair of pants. How to stop a leaking faucet or patch a hole in the wall. Learn how to sharpen a knife, boil beans, plunge a drain. These are the kind of basic skills that every adult should know, but you'd be surprised how many people have no idea how to do something as simple as boil rice. Carry a basic EDC kit. That's everyday carry, right? A good Leatherman, lighter, flashlight, cash, phone charger, and a small first aid pouch. Urban survival is about being ready, not rugged. Take a local workshop or a YouTube crash course in basic plumbing, electrical, or carpentry. These skills are marketable and profitable once you learn how to do them well. If you're in the suburbs, you can start a skills rotation group with friends or neighbors. One person teaches tool sharpening, another teaches basic electrical, another teaches gardening, even just one evening a month. Build a tool collection. Start with the basics and grow as you go. If you don't have one, get yourself a hammer, a cordless drill, sharpening tools, staple gun, axe, knife, saw. Keep them all well maintained and learn how to use them. Practice manual redundancy drills. Turn off your breaker box for 24 hours. Wash clothes by hand. Learn how to do it. Boil water and cook dinner over the fire pit. Do it with the kids and turn it into a game. Get familiar with failure before it happens. If you're out in the sticks, you can master your frontier food systems. Bake sourdough in a wood-fired oven, render tallow for storage, smoke fish or meat in a homemade smoker. The farther you live from a grocery store, the more this stuff becomes wealth. Build and repair basic infrastructure, fencing, small sheds, water catchment systems. Use salvaged material. Learn through doing. Go full manual once a season. No power tools, no running water, just you, your hands, and your systems. It's a challenge. It's training. It's empowerment. All right, I'm going to take a sip of water before we go into the next section. We're about halfway done, guys. All right. So let's hit resilient finance and trade next. Because when your whole net worth lives behind a login and the state can freeze it with one keystroke, you don't own your wealth. You're renting access. So build a system that doesn't care if the internet goes down, the banks glitch, or the feds roll out a new safe and convenient central bank digital currency. Now, if you're urban, start a cash reserve rotation. Pull 5 to 10% of every paycheck in physical cash. Stash it somewhere safe, away from banks and apps. You'd be shocked at how fast ATMs run dry in a crisis. Develop a high-value bartering skill, plumbing, herbal tinctures, tailoring, copywriting, tool and tech repair. It doesn't matter what it is, just make sure it's useful and tradable. Sell or trade unused gear locally. Old tools, electronics, camping gear. Practice real-world barter and get used to value exchange that doesn't rely on middlemen. If you're in the suburbs, build a resilience fund, a dedicated savings stash for homestead upgrades, bulk buys, or helping out your neighbors. Label it clearly and treat it like it's a sacred tool. Diversify your real assets, some cash, some Bitcoin, some precious metals, some tools, some seeds. If you can't touch it, trade it, or plant it, it's not truly yours. Buy in bulk and store food. Soap, grain, ammo, salt, fuel. Inflation-proof your pantry. Think in calories, in trade value, and in practical use, not just dollar signs. If you're out in the sticks, invest in regenerative assets. That's like livestock that multiply, trees that fruit, seed stock that grows. These aren't just calories, they're compounding, living wealth. Operate seasonal surplus to income systems. Sell chicks, smoked meats, dried herbs, and extra veggies to your local network. Your abundance becomes your currency. Track your net worth in functionality. How many people can you feed, right? How many days can you go without a supply run? That's real wealth. That's security. That's independence. All right, now let's crack into parallel economies and gray market basics. This is the off-the-books economy, the real one, the one that shows up when the official one dies or fails you. It runs on trust, guts, and practical value. If you're urban, you can start a skill swap crew in your building or your neighborhood. Trade knife sharpening for bread, pet care for sewing. No apps, just real human exchange. Print out old school barter flyers and hand deliver them to trusted neighbors or leave them in local shops. Offer what you can do and ask what others need. Build a hybrid fallback trade kit. A stash of Monero or Bitcoin for peer-to-peer swaps, a box of silver coins, a stash of high-value barter items like honey, medicine, and, let's just say, things that the alphabet boys don't need to know about, huh? Now, if you're in the suburbs, you can host garage-side barter markets, right? Invite 3 to 5 families that you trust to trade food, tools, services, or skills once a month. No receipts, no scanning, just handshake economics. Set up a backyard exchange hub, like a mini free pantry, but for trade. Post what you have and what you're looking for. Make it a weekly rhythm. Create a printed goods catalog, right? So photos of what your local crew can offer, whether that's eggs, seeds, repairs, meals, childcare, circulate it privately. If you're out in the sticks, join or build a regional barter network with other homesteaders, with ranchers, with craftspeople. Use radios, signal chats, or word of mouth. No surveillance, no gatekeepers, no bullshit. Use hard value currencies, so like raw milk, firewood, fresh eggs, smoked meat, seed packets. In a lot of places, those types of things trade better than cash, and they build trust way faster. Map out seasonal trade routes. Plan reoccurring exchanges with other off-gridders, or, people out in the country. Jerky for tinctures, honey for meat, firewood for help at harvest. Keep it going year after year, and that's what real economy looks like. Now, let's talk security and situational awareness, because you don't need to be Jason Bourne, but you do need to know when something's off and to have a plan for when it is. Now, if you're urban, layer your security. Reinforce your door frame. install a wedge alarm or door brace, and meet the people in the 2 units closest to you. In a real crisis, trust and time can buy you more than tech ever will. Carry something legal and effective. Pepper spray, a tactical flashlight, or a solid combat knife. Something that can be easily explained away if you need to. Just know how to use it and keep it accessible. Don't rely on hope. Train your situational awareness like a muscle. Take out the freaking earbuds. Watch the exits. Pay attention to people's body language. Know what looks normal so that you can spot what doesn't before it becomes a threat. If you're in the suburbs, build a layered perimeter defense. So motion lights, a well-placed trail camera, a big dog, and a good relationship with your neighbors. Think visibility and deterrence, not paranoia. Run low-light drills. Turn off the lights and practice moving through your house with a headlamp or a flashlight. Know where your tools are. Teach your kids how to stay calm and move with purpose. Reinforce a fallback room. Doesn't need to be a bunker. Just a room with a locking door, a first aid kit, backup communications, and something that, let's just say something that evens the odds if it ever comes to that. If you're out in the sticks, train with your tools. Firearms, bows, blades, whatever you got, master it. Doesn't do you any good if you don't know how to use it. Know your gear like you know your own body, how to maintain it, how to use it with confidence. Set up early warning systems, dogs, trail cameras, driveway alarms, and battery-free motion detectors. Know what's coming before it's on your porch. Run real-world scenarios. What do you do if someone rolls up in the driveway uninvited? What if there's a bear in the garden? What if your kid gets hurt half a mile from the house? Talk it through. Drill it out. Let your whole household play the scenario out so that fear doesn't win when it counts. Make it a game until it becomes muscle memory. Now, let's tackle community and mutual aid because, even the most badass frontiersmen had neighbors. If you're urban, host a low-key skillshare. It doesn't need to be extravagant. Just one person, that teaches first aid. Another shows up and teaches how to grow microgreens. Keep it in the building courtyard or at the local park. Break the ice, build the crew. Create a resilience roster. Who can sew? Who has tools? Who knows CPR? Print it, protect it, and only share it with the people that you trust. In a crisis, it's not about calling 911, it's about calling your network. Form a quiet crew, a small group in your building or street who agree to check in on each other during blackouts, lockdowns, or civil unrest. Have backup plans, basic roles, and signal systems in place before they're needed. If you're in the suburbs, create a mutual aid circle of 3 to 8 households. Check in with each other weekly. You guys can decide whether or not you want to have some shared gear, emergency childcare, group buys in bulk food, tools, or fuel, whatever benefits you, and then these aren't, they're not your neighbors anymore at that point. They become your extended tribe. Throw a monthly work party. So canning, have a canning party, firewood chopping party, build a fence together, garden prep, whatever seasonal, rotate yards, bring food, turn it into a hangout, grill something and crack some beers at the end, work hard, eat well, build culture. Map local assets. Who's got a tractor? Who can weld? Who has a chainsaw or a solar setup or medical knowledge? Build a local inventory. Share it wisely. When supply chains collapse, that map is a goldmine. If you're out in the sticks, host community events. That could be potlucks, barter markets, seed swaps, campfire nights, or skill workshops. Your land is more than just production. It's a cultural node. Use it to strengthen the web of trust around you. Run radio drills with local friends. Use GMRS, CB, or FRS radios to check in with other homesteaders across your ridge, your valley, or your region. Make it a habit before it becomes a lifeline. Form a disaster alliance. That's a pact with 1 to 3 nearby families to pool resources and combine forces in an emergency. Write out a basic contract, right? Shared food, defense, fallback, shelter, rules. Revisit it each season. You don't want to be negotiating terms mid-crisis. Next, digital and information sovereignty. Build a digital system that's resilient, decentralized, and actually yours, that cannot be shut off, shadow banned, or wiped clean by someone else's terms of service. If you're urban, get off surveillance tech. Use a de-Googled Android or an above phone. They look and work like normal phones without feeding your life into a data farm. Use a private browser like Brave or Firefox with ad blockers built in. It cuts out the noise, protects your habits, and speed things up. Back up your life on an encrypted USB key and a local hard drive. Store critical documents, passwords, and contacts on your shelf or in your lockbox, not in the cloud. If you're in the suburbs, host your own digital life. Set up a Start9 embassy or a Raspberry Pi server. Run email, calendars, photos, and even Bitcoin nodes on your terms. Feels like the future, but it's actually how things used to work, local and private. Switch your family chat to Signal or Session. Teach the kids. Teach grandma. Your group chat should not be on an FBI data feed. Build an offline library. Load up USB drives or hard drives with permaculture PDFs, first aid manuals, ham radio guides, herbal medicine sheets, recipes, and classic books. Or movies, Knowledge is power, especially without Wi-Fi. If you're out in the sticks, mesh up your neighborhood with GoTenna, Meshtastic, or GMRS radios. Communicate across homesteads with no cell towers and no monthly fees. Build a media cache. Movies, audiobooks, skill-building videos. Store them on a mini server or even a USB stick with a media player. Education and morale matter too. Decentralize your message. Post to platforms like Nostr or use IPFS to host your ideas. If you're creating real value, don't let some internet meta decide whether or not it deserves to exist, all right? And last, you guys made it, but not least, mental and emotional resilience. Because when things fall apart, the first battle is internal. And the people who keep their head on straight can lead, adapt, and rebuild. Now, if you're urban, establish a morning ritual that builds up inner strength. So, that could look like 10 minutes of breath work, journaling, or stretching and exercise before you even touch your phone. Protect your mental terrain. Practice a dopamine detox once a week. No screens, no processed sugar, no scrolling. Just let your nervous system recalibrate. Go totally analog just for a day and just be alive in the real world. Write down your personal code for life. Not for anyone else, just for you. The values that guide you, the vision that drives you, the person you're becoming. When the world pulls you off course, this brings you home. If you're in the suburbs, you can anchor your family with a weekly rhythm. Sunday night reviews, unplugged dinners, evening walks. Predictability in a chaotic world is a superpower. Start a personal development journal. Each day, log one thing that you learned, built, fixed, or overcame. Small victories tracked over time keeps up momentum, builds self-trust, and keeps you out of a doom spiral. Design a personal ritual that brings you back to reality when life starts spinning out of control. Go chop some wood, jump in some cold water, brew tea, walk barefoot in the dirt, light a fire and stare into it. Whatever, do something physical, primal, and grounding. Make it yours and let it ground you when the world gets overwhelming. Now, if you're out in the sticks, you can create seasonal rites of passage. That means planting feasts, solstice fires, harvest ceremonies. Give your family a culture that's stronger than the one that's collapsing. Practice voluntary discomfort, cold water plunges, fasting, hard labor. Train your mind to stay calm under stress by choosing challenges before life throws them at you. Start a men's group or a women's circle. Not therapy, not gossip, just truth-telling, wisdom trading, and emotional recalibration with a few trusted neighbors. It's an antidote for the epidemic of modern loneliness. Holy shit. Good job, guys. If you're still here, I am so proud of you. I need some water. Give me a sec. Jesus Christ. Is everybody all right after that? I don't know if I am. I told you this shit is not just about, tomatoes and compost. Whew. You guys just got hit with 99 different strategies to start living like a productive creator, not a passive dependent. If you made it through all that, you're either an absolute beast or you're just as crazy as I am. Either way, man, you belong here. Welcome to the modern renaissance. Welcome to sustainable sedition. But I've got one more for you. Please don't run away. Number 100. And funnily enough, though, this one doesn't add anything else to your plate. It actually subtracts. And it's the keystone. It's the quiet little skill that stops this whole house that we built from falling in on itself. That's why we've made our practical skill highlight this week. How to choose what not to do. Look, I know how it is. You get into this world of preparedness and self-reliance, and suddenly you're knee-deep in YouTube tutorials thinking that you need to be a fucking blacksmith and a carpenter and a goat whisperer and a crypto-anarchist and a part-time beekeeper all by next Tuesday, right? The prepper world loves to mentally masturbate to this lone wolf fantasy, but the reality is, when you try to do everything yourself, it's a straight shot to burnout. You'll end up half-assing 37 different things instead of mastering the 3 that could actually benefit your life and make a real impact and that matter to you. There are 2 things that guarantee failure in life. And one is lack of effort, and the other is trying to do too much, too fast, with too little clarity. You'll think that you're being productive, but in reality, you're just drowning in half-finished products, overcommitment, and guilt. No man's an island. No one can do everything. That's why community matters. Humans are social animals. You're not supposed to do it all by yourself. So don't get fooled into thinking you've got to be this, self-reliant Rambo character. Do this instead. Step 1, define the mission. This isn't some, vague someday goal. This is, what are you actually trying to build right now? Is it a food production system? Is it a business? Is it a community group? Are you trying to build an online course? Are you trying to just build up your savings? Maybe you're trying to build a homeschool curriculum for your kid. Whatever it is, define it. Put it in the context of your life and understand why you're doing it. If you don't know the target, you'll dump out all of your ammunition on everything else and end up hitting nothing. Step 2, subtract and focus. Every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. You've only got so many hours in a day, man. And you've only got so much energy before you just keel over. So start asking yourself, what's actually moving the needle? And define that. And then cut the rest. If it's not directly pushing your current objective forward, then right now it's just a distraction. If it's really important to you, write it down, stick it in your back pocket, and then maybe come back to it later. But only once your core system is running on autopilot. Build that first, then experiment later. Step 3, lock it in with action. Pick one thing that you're doing right now that isn't serving your mission and drop it. Let it go. Not next week, not after more research. Now, today. The fastest way to sharpen your focus is with a clean cut. You don't need more moving parts. You need a core system that frees you up and lets you breathe. The whole point of all this is to create systems that actually work for you, not the other way around. We're not exiting the state's systems to turn around and enslave ourselves to our own. That's, not what we're trying to do here. We recently had to do this ourselves with our meat rabbits. We moved up to this property. We got a 5-year-old, a 1.5-year-old, and another baby that's due in a month. I run a handyman service and a podcast. And on top of all that, we already got Muscovy ducks for meat, chickens for eggs, and a goddamn jungle of a garden. So, we got to build a drip system so it doesn't take us 10 hours a week to water the garden. We got to seal up a leak in the duck pond so that it stops emptying every summer. And we need to automate our feed and water system for the chickens. We've already got our hands full. So the rabbits just don't make sense right now. And we love doing rabbits, so it's like, but instead of being emotionally attached to it and trying to force it, and then having the whole mission suffer for that one thing, we had to take a step back, and maybe next year or the year after, once everything else is dialed in and running smooth, then we'll revisit the rabbits. And if I'm really that desperate for rabbit meat in the meantime, all I gotta do is go shake a few hands, find someone else in the community who does rabbits, and buy or trade for what I need. So cut out the clutter. Supplement your needs from your community. And get your ass to work on building your mission. You're not here to do it all. You're here to do what matters to you. And do it well. Now sometimes, the most immediate mission that you have in front of you is figuring out what the hell you're going to make for dinner. So, eliminate that decision fatigue and throw a pork shoulder in the oven in the morning before you go and handle your shit for the day. And then later, after spending a day at work, tending the garden, chasing your kid around, fixing a busted fence, or hell, writing a 99-point manifesto about collapsing empires and backyard renaissance, you get to eat like a savage barbarian without lifting another goddamn finger. You can do that with our recipe of the week, cancel-proof carnitas. Here's how. Start your morning by mixing up a spice rub. You're going to need chili powder, smoked paprika, oregano, cumin, brown sugar, salt, and black pepper. Get it balanced just right. Taste it with your fingertip, make it yours. Now, cut your pork shoulder into big, fist-sized chunks and rub that mix into that meat. Make sure that you get it in every crack, every crevice. Sear those chunks in a hot pan with a little bit of fat until they're golden brown and just shy of burnt. That's where the flavor lives, is right there in that crust. Now, toss those brown cubes in your crock pot or your Dutch oven. Then top it all with some rough chopped onions, smashed garlic cloves, a couple bay leaves, 2 or 3 cinnamon sticks, juice from 2 limes, and a whole sliced orange. Peel and everything. Now comes the magic. Crack open a cold pint of your favorite Mexican beer, whether it's Modelo, Pacifico, whatever you got, and dump the whole thing over the top like you're baptizing it into manhood, right? Set your crock pot to low or stick your Dutch oven in the oven at 275 degrees. Then just walk away for the next 12 hours. While that pork transforms into smoky, citrusy, perfect golden carnitas, you go and handle your shit. Because, let me tell you, when you come back at the end of the day, you'll shred that pork with a fork, and it'll just fall apart like the U.S. government. Try not to let the smell make you sob. Like a child who's just found his parents again after getting lost in a store. You got 2 choices now that it's done. Go grab some sourdough and make a pulled pork sandwich with barbecue sauce and coleslaw. Or press out some corn tortillas and throw them together with some tacos, right? With a salsa made from chopped mango, jalapeno, red onion, lime, and cilantro. Or just dig it out of the bowl and eat it like a sociopath and enjoy. Either way, man, you just made a meal that hits like the goddamn Declaration of Independence, all right? And all that's left to do now is dig in with greasy hands, no shirt, no shame, and a 1,000-yard stare like you just survived the battle at Helm's Deep. And when your belly's full and the fire's lit, grab a copy of our book of the month, Regenerative Soil by Matt Powers. Because this whole modern renaissance that we're building, it starts underground. Literally. This book doesn't just teach you how to grow food. It teaches you how to build a living ecosystem. One that repairs the damage from decades of chemical warfare against the soil. If you want to feed your family, rebuild fertility, and grow resilience from the roots up, this book is your field manual. Whew! All right, y'all. That is a wrap on dispatch number 6. If you enjoy the show and you want to support the work that we do, the biggest thing that you can do for me right now is share it around. Post it, text it, tell a friend who's ready to stop scrolling and start building. We're still pretty fresh out the gate, but thanks to you guys, Sustainable Sedition Radio is already punching way above its weight, right? We cracked into the top 250 philosophy podcasts in the US on Apple in our first 3 days. It's not because I've got a big budget or a production team. It's because of people like you. So thank you. If you haven't subscribed yet, just search Sustainable Sedition Radio on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. While you're there, drop a quick review if you got a second. It really helps this thing build momentum. If you want more from us, check out the resources page on the site for a list of books, documentaries, and experts. Just head to sustainablesedition.com/resources. And remember, most revolutions end with someone else in charge. Let's become the kind of people and build the kind of world where no one has to be in charge. Thanks for being here, guys. Thanks for giving a shit. And thanks for being the kind of people who build instead of beg. Until next Monday, take care, keep learning, keep questioning, keep growing, and keep on building what thrives and changing